Hello students, today we're going to talk a little bit about HDR Pro. And what I want to show you is that I actually took 8 HDR shots, which you are to take some HDR pictures in your proficiency this month. Sometimes you may just have 3, but I took 8 for this particular tutorial. So what I want you to see is how my shutter speed has changed. My aperture stays the same, my ISO, my white balance, but I gradually increase my shutter speed as I go along. And it's also evident that I had to use a tripod on this so that my image would not shift as I took the pictures throughout. You can find these pictures to perform this tutorial in my Q Drive, High School, Bonai, Level 3, and November tutorials folder. You first need to copy all of these into your own tutorial folder for the November month for you to begin working on these. So once I have them all highlighted and saved in the right spot, I go into Tools, Photoshop, and merge to HDR Pro. Now this will probably take a few minutes for this to particularly render out, and basically what it's going to do is it's going to layer each image one on top of another so that they put them all together in layers, and then it's going to bring up a different dialog box for us to alter and work with. Once it's rendered out, it's going to bring up this separate dialog box. We're going to work with HDR Pro. Now the only downside to this is you must work within this space right now in order to make any changes. And basically, as you can see, it's combined all of the images for you. So the very under or overexposed to the very underexposed. And what it's trying to do is kind of pull out the best from each layer to give it a little bit more vibrant color and a little bit more definition. Now within this dialog box there are many things that you can go through. Now there are presets here, and these are all kind of junky, almost like filter kind of Photoshop-y things that will make the picture look not so photorealistic. Okay, it added a little bit of kind of sharpening to that. So I'm going to go back to the default, but you're welcome to experiment with those. Down here there are 4 different selections here, which we'll talk about a little bit more in a different tutorial, but for now I want you to leave it on local adaption. You have the most slider bars and adjustments here, and you'll notice with some of these things it won't take much. Some things will change drastically, other things won't change very much at all. But I'm interested mostly in the gamma and the exposure, and if you bring the gamma up, it adds almost kind of like a sharpening effect to it. I like to bring it a little bit less, where it gives it almost kind of like a softer, almost a Gaussian blurish kind of effect on it. Exposure is, increasing the light, increasing the darkness. If you want to go back to 0, you could easily just type it in and hit enter. Detail will kind of sharpen it, but sharpen it along the edges a little bit more of the scale of what's happening in the picture. And obviously shadow and highlight, again, will adjust. The shadows, as you saw, added more definition in those 2 shadows there, like in that little hole in the stream down there. Okay, kind of darken that. And the highlights are obviously going to lighten the lighter parts even more, so that kind of washed that out. So I want to go back actually probably to 0 and maybe even just a little bit darker on those highlights there. You can also increase or decrease the vibrance and the saturation depending on what seems to look good or what seems to look a little too surreal there. So it depends on how realistic or how, kind of photoshopped you want to make it look. Curves here, once you look at the curves and levels tutorial, you'll understand a little bit more about how this can potentially work in your favor, depending on how you want to angle it and create points to work on the picture. I actually don't think I need those curves for this, so I'm going to go back to reset curve on here and bring it back to this original state. So I personally am pretty happy with how this looks. I want you to save it the way that you think it looks best, what you could come up with based on how you shot it and how you put it, based on how you put it together with these pictures that I shot. And then what you will do is actually reshoot 8 shots of your own of something different and all those different exposure points and put one together through this HDR dialog box, which again will take just a moment here to render. So it's taking a moment here and it's converting to the HDR image. Again, I apologize for the render time, and in fact it might actually take longer on your own pictures there. And what I want to compare this to, again, we're kind of getting a lot of the green, the orange, and actually the gray from the asphalt looks almost a little bit blue kind of against the sky there. But if I go back to bridge and I click just on maybe like my kind of best exposed shot here as I see it, the most proper exposure, we can compare the two images. And you can see that this one is a lot duller. This one has a lot more vibrance. Now, does it look a little bit photoshopped? I believe so, but again, this is where you can kind of play and work with and maybe even do, more than 8 shots depending on how much our computers will handle. So what I expect you to do is I expect you to recreate this with the images that I gave you using HDR Pro, and then I want you to go take 8 images of your own of any scene that you choose, preferably one that is static, and recreate your own HDR Pro image. Good luck!